Wowie, friends. Do we have a doozy for you today? I'm Aaron.
I'm Tom.
And this is Baby's First Watch List.
And this was Baby's first movie.
Tom, my next sentence. It says, on this episode, we are discussing the first movie our baby has ever watched.
Yes. And his second podcast episode.
He's right here. I don't know if he's going to last sleeping this whole time, to be honest with you.
No. He's already been fidgeting. But we said that last time and he was fine. So we'll see.
That's true. Today we're talking about 1990s Misery.
Which, if you haven't seen it, if you didn't, watch it when I posted about it on Instagram this week, you got to watch it. It's such a fun movie. It's a joy. I love this movie.
I love this movie. It's, I think, the first movie we've done where neither one of us was born when it came out.
Yes.
And I wish I was born because, although I probably wouldn't have watched it.
Because Annie Wilkes gives me life.
It's so good because it's just that good. I saw it when I was in high school, I believe. I did not realize just how much I loved this movie.
This is one where I do remember the first time I watched it.
Yeah, you saw it more recently than I did.
I did. I saw it at my friend Mike's apartment at Rutgers after a night of hanging out during the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy.
So that was what, 2012?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, I don't know why that's a very distinct memory that I have, but I liked it then and I loved it now.
Yeah, it's so great. I had it as watched and liked on my Letterboxd, but a lot of the movies I watched like back in high school or middle school or whatever, I didn't put an actual star rating to.
Same. If I didn't really remember, I didn't feel like I could give it an accurate rating.
Well, now, guess what? 5 stars.
5 stars, baby.
5 stars. So this psychological thriller, is that what you would call it? That's what they call it online.
I don't really, I don't think there's much psychological about it. I think it's just a thriller.
Is it even just is it a drama / thriller?
No, it's a thriller. There's fight scenes. There's
true.
tension. There's,
hobbling.
Yes. Naming.
Okay. So this thriller starring Kathy Bates and the late great James Caan. That's why we chose this movie.
He was the inspiration for this episode.
Is a Stephen King adaptation from his 1987 novel of the same name. So it was only out for a couple years before it was adapted into this movie.
Yes.
It was a critical and commercial success, grossing $61.3 million on a mere $20 million budget. It was written by William Goldman, who I got confused with like William Friedkin and also William Golding.
Okay, so definitely not William Golding.
He wrote Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
And William Friedkin
did
wrote The Exorcist. Or directed The Exorcist.
William Goldman.
Oh, I have what he did too.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So he won 2 Oscars for screenplay writing for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is an excellent movie.
Yes.
And All the President's Men, which I have not seen. He also wrote the novel and the screenplay for The Princess Bride.
Yes.
That's what I remember his name from.
Me too.
From The Princess Bride.
Yes.
But he did Misery as well. And he did a bunch of other stuff too.
Well, he I think I have this later in the trivia section, but Rob Reiner specifically was like, I need him to be.
It seems that they worked together a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. So Misery was directed by Rob Reiner. Meathead, if you are a fan of All in the Family.
Bunkerheads.
Carol O'Connor fans. Oh, we should have named our kid Carol.
Or O'Connor.
Oh my gosh, it's kind of closer than yeah. So he's known for, of course, playing Meathead. He won a couple of Emmys for that, actually. He did, I think 2. But he's also known for, in my opinion, directing Heater after Heater in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, he's a legend.
It's wild. It's kind of like from like a 10-year span from like the early 80s to the early 90s. I love every single thing that I've seen that he directed.
Yeah, and the rest of them I want to see.
Yeah. So his first movie was This Is Spinal Tap, which really skyrocketed my love for mockumentaries.
There's so much stuff. I'm going to venture to say that The Office doesn't get made without This Is Spinal Tap.
I agree with you on that.
It's a distant ancestor, but
it is a mockumentary style show, and there are so many movies that get direct inspiration from This Is Spinal Tap.
Absolutely. I mean, What We Do in the Shadows is a major TV show now, coming from a movie that was a mockumentary. That is very much like This Is Spinal Tap. I'm sure there were mockumentaries before This Is Spinal Tap, but that is like the big cult one that everybody knows. Earliest one.
Of course, you get Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping.
Of course.
Our favorite movie as a family.
Our weekly mention of Pop Star.
Yes. And I think there's so many Christopher Guest movies.
Best in Show.
Yeah. So I love mockumentary style stuff. And so I love This Is Spinal Tap. He also did Stand By Me.
Another great Stephen King adaptation.
Which I don't know if it's that one or Misery. That's my favorite.
Stephen King said that the only reason that he let a Hollywood studio buy Misery was because Rob Reiner had already done so well with Stand By Me, and he said, I need Rob Reiner to be the director.
100%. Stand By Me.
They're sort of sister pieces in that way then.
It kind of is. It's really interesting. And Stand By Me is based on a short story called The Body that Stephen King wrote. I find that at least a couple of his adaptations that are the most successful are based on short stories. You have that one, and then you have Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, which was turned into Shawshank Redemption, which back when we were in college, I felt it had a big renaissance. It's like, that's the best movie ever made, right? Did you feel that like people were always talking about how great Shawshank Redemption was?
I think people still do talk about it, but there was a time there where it sort of revived.
Yeah. And Stand By Me, though, is I'm going to say that one still might beat Misery as my favorite Stephen King adaptation.
Okay.
1986, River Phoenix, who is my forever crush. I love River Phoenix.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. to him. And then Rob Reiner also did The Princess Bride.
Yes, which is one of my favorites of all time.
Amazing.
That's a top 5 for me.
That was the
easy.
next year he did that.
Yeah.
He then did When Harry Met Sally, which I have talked about being one of my favorite movies, let alone romantic comedies. It's probably number one.
That was the Spider-Verse episode with the New York movies, right?
That's right. Then he did Misery. And then after that, he did A Few Good Men, which I have not seen.
Haven't seen, but obviously it's a classic.
I'm sure it's great. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
So that's Rob Reiner over the course of 10 years.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That is an out of control heater for 10 years.
Like I can't even think. And just the breadth of genres that he covers.
It's all over the place.
It's wild. You know, I think that proves to me that he's in my like pantheon, right? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Of directors that I really like.
He directed Annie Wilkes and Princess Buttercup.
Yeah.
Within a year of each other.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, 3 years of each other.
3 years of each other,
but
sorry.
Yes. So Misery was nominated for 1 Oscar, and it won 1 Oscar, with Kathy Bates taking home the trophy for what? Is it Best Actress or Supporting?
Actress.
It is. It's actress.
As it should be.
I had to look that up to make sure, but it is. They gave her the right one.
As it should be.
I think that if this movie had come out now, they might have pushed for supporting instead of actress.
Maybe.
Because that's a kind of role that
no. She never would have gotten this nomination today. I'm talking about this later. With the way that awards don't really honor genre films like this.
I have that literally written right here. But yes, I think that if they were going to try to do it, they were going to try to do it. They would have tried to do it in supporting. And Kathy Bates.
And it would have been Frances McDormand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's part of what I'm going to ask later on who would be a good Annie. Although Frances McDormand's too old. I feel like we always think of Kathy Bates as old. She wasn't back then.
Yeah.
And Kathy Bates, she has 3 other nominations for Oscars, all in the supporting actress category.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that any of them.
Yep. About Schmidt was the big one.
Oh, yeah.
She was like in the hot tub.
Yes,
I didn't watch that movie.
No,
I
it's
just
on our
know
list.
that. Yeah. So it's extra impressive that Bates won this award because she was largely unknown at the time. And it's also, as Tom alluded to, extremely rare for horror movies to get awards recognition.
Or thrillers.
I would kind of put this in the horror kind of subgenre.
Did you look at so I found an article that said every horror or thriller winner ever for an Oscar.
I mean, I feel like it's
not a whole lot. It's like 5 of them.
The Exorcist.
No.
Oh, wow. 0 for 1.
Actors. Sorry, actors.
Oh, actors.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. That's actually...
one of them is very, very famous.
One of them is very famous?
Very, very
what
famous.
year?
1991.
Oh, well, then you've got your Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
So that's going to be Hopkins and Jodie Foster. It won the big 5, right?
Yes.
So that's picture, screenplay. In this case,
Director.
I guess it's adapted screenplay. Yeah. Director, actor, and actress, of which there are only 3 movies of all time that have won that kind of big thing.
Yeah.
And that's going to be 1991's Silence of the Lambs is the latest movie to have won those 5. Before that was 1975 with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was not horror. Although I guess you could categorize it maybe thrillery.
I have something about that too, actually. Okay. That movie, a reference for later.
And then before then was the 1930s, which was It Happened One Night, which was a really great romantic comedy. So yes, that makes sense. Silence of the Lambs. Okay.
Yes. So other than that, the only other actors to win Oscars for horror or thriller films, and this is what they're sort of, I don't really agree with one of them as a horror or thriller, but okay, we're fine with it. Frederick March in 1931 for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He won Best Actor.
That's fair.
For Jekyll and Hyde. Ruth Gordon won for Rosemary's Baby. She was the neighbor.
Yeah.
She won Best Supporting Actress.
She was great in that. She was awesome. That movie, listen, I know, but it's so good. It's so good.
The one that I don't know if I agree with, but I'll give it just because whatever. Natalie Portman for Black Swan.
Do you know what's horror about that?
The relationship with the director.
First of all, that. Second of all, how much I didn't like it the second time I watched it. Yikes.
Yeah. It wasn't that good. Sorry. No. Sorry, Swanheads.
Yeah. Anything else?
Those are the only actors that I saw on the website that I looked at.
So that's really interesting. I would have guessed other ones. I would have guessed Psycho. I would have guessed The Exorcist.
I mean, it's possible that writing or directing one for some other movies, but just acting in specific.
Sixth Sense, stuff like that. But yeah, and I know that recently there's April Jinglin' Janglin'.
Her brand new collar, which is way louder than the other one.
Yes, of course. There has been a few different movies that have women at the forefront that have been snubbed for Oscar nominations. Notably, Toni Collette in Hereditary, which I refused to watch, and I watched Lilo and Stitch instead.
Yeah, she was great.
And Lupita Nyong'o in Us.
Yes, I was just talking about that the other day because Nope just came out, Jordan Peele's new movie. And I was saying how, I'm still waiting on that nomination for Lupita from like 3 years ago.
Maybe we'll get it for Keke Palmer this year. So this is a movie that Stephen King considers one of his top 10 adaptations. Now, how much of a prolific writer to movie pipeline do you have to be to have a top 10?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? But
have some that would be like, oh, this is definitely not top 10.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some.
Yes.
And most critics agree, if not all, that Misery is one of his best adaptations. So one little thing before I get us started with our summary here is that there have been a few other adaptations of the novel Misery, but the one that I thought was the most interesting was a play that was also written. Oh, you already looked it up?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, darn it, because I was going to ask who played.
No, yeah, I wouldn't have gotten it.
Okay, so it was a play that was also written by William Goldman, and it actually premiered at Bucks County Playhouse, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from us. It then transferred to Broadway in 2015, so not that long ago. It was a limited engagement, and I said I want you to guess who played Paul and Annie, but I already know. Yeah. It was Bruce Willis and Laurie Metcalf.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Who received a Tony nomination for her role.
I've got one better for you. Not better, maybe, but there was another adaptation that was supposed to happen prior to that.
Okay.
Before that Broadway adaptation. There was another one that came out before. Do you know? I don't know who was supposed to play Paul, but do you know who was supposed to play Annie?
Who?
You won't guess ever.
Who was it?
Julia Roberts.
What I like about this movie is that I feel like the character of Annie could have gone in so many different directions depending on casting. And that is certainly a way that it could have gone.
Yeah. I think Laurie Metcalf would have been down the same road as Kathy Bates.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I didn't see it, but I hope that it comes to a streaming service at some point, as we talked about.
Heck yeah. Mean Girls episode. I hope they taped it. Julia Roberts, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So the last thing before I go into the summary, the very, very last thing is I want to give a little shout out to our friend Kate. We had a few people that have asked us what we're going to call our listeners.
Oh, we should have started with this.
I know, but I wanted to put it in somewhere. So go ahead, Tom. You could tell me what Kate was, her suggestion was.
We're just going to start calling you guys the Babysitters Club.
It's so cute.
That's it.
I do love the Babysitters Club. So TM to them, I guess.
Yeah. We're not making money off this anyway.
No.
So.
The recent adaptation on Netflix that was canceled after 2 seasons was great. And I also, when I was younger, I went to a fair, and I never read any of the Babysitters Club's books, but I went with my Uncle Tommy and his girlfriend at the time, not Elena. Oh my God, we'll pretend like that girlfriend didn't exist.
That never happened.
Yeah, because we love Elena so much. But I won a prize, and I picked a Babysitter's Club cassette tape, and it was an audio book version of one of the books, which is just showing you how nerdy I was.
And it was foreshadowing to right now.
Yeah. So there you go. Give me a summary of Misery.
Congratulations, Babysitter's Club.
All right, give me a summary.
All right. Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, is a famous writer, and he has a popular series of romance novels featuring a heroine named Misery Chastain. Wanting to move on and start the next phase of his career, Paul is out at his writing hermit haven in the remote Silver Creek, Colorado. He finishes a manuscript for his upcoming novel. He caps the moment off as he always does with a Lucky Strike cigarette and a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne. On his way back to his home in New York, Paul drives through a blizzard and his car flips over. He's rescued by a nurse named Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, who pries open his car door and brings him to her home. Days later, Paul wakes up with 2 broken legs and a dislocated shoulder. Annie tells him that she's his #1 fan, and she backs it up by going into minute detail about his Misery novels. Even her giant pig is named Misery. She lets him know she'll look after him until the phone lines come back online and the roads reopen, so, he's just hanging out. After Paul lets her read his new manuscript, Annie turns angry because of the profanity, but she sort of apologizes after going on a bit of a rant. Then, after she finds out about Misery's death, she goes ham. She flies into a rage and tells Paul that no one has any clue where he is because she never called anybody. Shortly thereafter, Annie makes Paul burn the only copy of his new manuscript, and she brings in a typewriter, forcing Paul to write a brand new novel called Misery's Return, where Misery comes back to life. Paul starts to use his time in the room to plot his way out. When Annie goes to buy him the typewriter paper he requested, Paul fashions a lockpick out of a hairpin and leaves the room, wheeling himself around the house. He accidentally knocks a penguin figurine off of a table, but catches it and replaces it. Paul begins stashing the painkillers Annie was giving to him in a small hole in his mattress, and during dinner, he tries to spike her wine with the crushed painkillers, but she accidentally knocks over her glass.
That scene was wild.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
I love that scene.
I don't know how that caught me off guard, but it was so good.
I know. It's great, and I also we've seen this movie before. Yeah.
So in the ensuing days, Paul finds a scrapbook chock full of weird newspaper clippings about Annie, finding out that she most likely killed many people, including her own father and her college roommate, and that her ex-husband divorced her, citing mental cruelty. She was also tried for the deaths of a number of infants at the hospital she worked at, though she got off because of a lack of evidence. He also finds that she quoted lines from his Misery novels at trial. He turns to the last page to find a newspaper clipping of his own disappearance. When Annie realizes that Paul had been leaving his room because the penguin figurine he replaced was facing the wrong direction, she grabs a sledgehammer and she breaks both of his ankles.
That's the big scene we all know and love.
Hobbling. Throughout all of this, the local sheriff Buster, played by Richard Farnsworth, and his iconic deputy wife Virginia, played by Frances Sternhagen,
who you may know as Bunny in Sex and the City, Charlotte's mother-in-law.
Yes. Buster's been investigating Paul's disappearance, and he puts 2 and 2 together by heading to local businesses, realizing that Annie had been buying things like specific paper and all of one bookstore's available Misery novels, so he heads over to her place. Having drugged Paul and put him into a hidden compartment in her basement, Annie welcomes Buster into the home, but when Buster hears Paul screaming in the basement, he opens the compartment and Annie blows a hole through his back with a shotgun.
Yeah,
R.I.P. Buster.
That was so sad.
Yeah. As Annie tells Paul that she plans to commit a murder-suicide, he convinces her to let him finish the new manuscript and give Misery back to the world. When Paul finishes the manuscript, he asks Annie for a Lucky Strike cigarette and some Dom Perignon, which she pronounces Dom Perignon.
Love. Just
as he did at the beginning of the movie. When Annie returns, he lights the manuscript on fire and he hits Annie over the head with the typewriter. We then get a knockdown, drag-out brawl between Annie and Paul where Annie shoots him. The 2 end up outside the room. Paul grabs a metal doorstop in the shape of Annie's pig Misery and bashes her over the head, killing her. We get an epilogue about 18 months later where Paul meets his agent Marcia, played by Lauren Bacall, at an upscale restaurant in New York. Marcia tells him about the positive early buzz for his first post-Misery novel and suggests that he write a nonfiction book about his experience with Annie. At that point, Paul sees Annie pushing a cart toward his table and declines Marcia's suggestion. As Annie approaches, Paul recognizes that he's hallucinating, and the actual waitress tells Paul that she's his number one fan. Paul responds by saying, "That's very sweet of you," and the movie fades to the credits.
Yeah, excellent. That movie is so rockin'.
Yeah, I don't think I missed anything in that, really.
I really don't think you did. I was going to say, you missed a special appearance by Lauren Bacall.
Nope, I slid that in at the end.
You slid that in. Yeah, I think it's spot on. Excellent job. This movie, I have a lot of different discussion points and questions
I don't have too many questions, but I have a lot of discussion.
Who do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
No, go for it.
So, I mean, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is we're going to start off kind of easing in here. This takes place in probably the 80s, because it was written in 87. It came out, the movie, or the book.
Yeah.
And it takes place in this kind of remote winter village with like no people around. There's no kind of
very tiny mountain village, like mountain town.
Exactly. So do you think that this movie would work if it was taking place maybe today, or in a different setting?
Today, these towns still exist. It would be a lot harder with the cell phone towers and things like that. Yeah. They would have found him quicker, probably.
Yeah.
But I don't see any reason why, he would have been able to write quicker. She would have given him a computer, a laptop. I think with the technology, I think the story might have taken place in a faster time, but I think that the events probably could have gone the same way. And in terms of a setting, I think it could have happened in a city too, because it's like hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. I thought about a movie, Rear Window.
Yes.
And how we watched Rear Window a really long time ago, but it kind of has the same sort of vibe of secretive and people living these secret lives and things being hidden. And I like the idea of something taking place like hiding in plain sight with people all over.
Oh yeah.
In Misery, there was just kind of that one scene where Paul noticed a helicopter passing overhead.
Yeah.
And was like, well, I guess I'm not getting found, whatever. In a different setting, like if it took place in Brooklyn or something, you would have a lot more of those moments.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, would that cheapen it a little?
Not necessarily. Stephen King would have had to have found a way around it. Basically making sure that Paul couldn't make noise or things like that.
Yeah.
Because obviously somebody would hear him from outside a window, but the fact that this was a remote location it's the right setting.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's necessarily the only setting.
It also adds that little bit of hygge, the coziness, which is kind of in direct contrast to the actual plot.
I guess, yeah.
Because her house is kind of cottagecore.
Yeah.
It's kind of, your grandma's house, despite the fact that Annie seems to be like, I don't know, in her maybe 40s, 30s, something like that. And the wallpaper. And then you've got the fires and this and that. Like it's like cozy almost, like this little small town. And even though it's winter, everyone's all bundled up and whatever. And I love that in comparison to the horrors that's going on.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's interesting. My next question.
Wait, can I just say, this whole movie could have been avoided. I said this at the beginning when we were watching it. All he had to do was like wait for the blizzard to be over.
He did say he didn't know a blizzard was coming at one point.
All he had to do was check the weather, and this movie never happens.
Yeah, but maybe he didn't have like a TV.
Yeah, maybe.
Because remember, it's not like he could just check the app on his phone.
Maybe he could.
On his fake phone that it didn't exist in 1987.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had in 2015, Bruce Willis and Laurie Metcalf play Paul and Annie. What about today? If this was being remade, do you have any actors or actresses in mind? I have a couple.
I have one.
Okay.
Oscar Isaac.
That was my first one, and then I deleted it because I was like, I can't talk about Oscar Isaac again.
Every time, Oscar Isaac.
I literally wrote Oscar Isaac, and then I was like, oh, God, I can't say him again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than him, it's got to be somebody who has
hi, baby.
Like gravitas a little bit. Even if it's not somebody who is like super old, like an Anthony Hopkins or somebody like that.
Yeah.
It could always be I'm trying to think of somebody who is like old but not super old. Like, I think Robert Downey Jr. would be great.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, he would be a little more snarky, but
Yeah.
But James Caan was kind of snarky in this movie too.
He was so funny.
He was very funny in this movie.
All right, you want to know my 3? I picked 3 very different vibes.
Okay.
So my first one that I think this is the best choice is Ethan Hawke.
I was gonna say him too, but again, we just talked about Ethan Hawke in the other episode.
I can't help it. Ethan Hawke, I think, is a really good, especially because he is a novelist or a writer, and he kind of gives off that weird vibe.
Yeah, he's a weirdo.
My next
he's
one,
he's a writer for sure.
Yeah, yeah. My next one, and he doesn't fly off at the handle too much in his movies.
Yeah,
and I like that. There's a little bit more of a down to earthness to him.
When he does, it's a point of the movie.
Exactly.
Like in First Reformed when he goes nuts.
Exactly. My next one was Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Okay. Yeah.
I just think he kind of gives off that professorial kind of intellectual vibe.
Is he weird enough though?
It would start. Is James Caan weird? No.
Yeah, that's true. He's kind of
so I think he would be a really good choice. And then my third one, if you're going a little bit younger, I know you don't love him, but I think Adam Driver would be. I don't love him either, but I think he would be good in that role.
Okay.
Oh,
I've got one that's way out there.
Okay.
Way in orbit.
All right.
Adam Sandler.
Oh, I like it. Adam Sandler would be an interesting choice because it's unexpected. I know that we would expect it a little bit more.
I would say maybe pre-Uncut Gems Adam Sandler.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. How about Annie? I picked 2 that both have a similar vibe.
Frances McDormand is the one we mentioned earlier, but she, like you said, she might be a little bit old at this point.
I did not go down that road.
Well, no, that's one of the ones I would have thought of. What are yours?
I said Greta Gerwig.
Okay.
Because she kind of gives off the weird stalker fan.
Yeah.
That would be like into something really like a lot. And then I went Aubrey Plaza.
Yes, that's the one.
Right?
She's the one.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought Aubrey Plaza would be great.
Yeah.
And she could play it a little more subtle, which would be out of character for her, which she normally does. And I think that would be interesting.
Or she could not play it subtly and do what she did in Legion, which was wild.
There you go.
I don't think it would matter either way. I think that I think another guy who could play Paul is Mark Ruffalo.
I thought of him too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would be what I like about Mark Ruffalo,
or Michael Keaton for that matter.
Oh, well, I'm always team Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
What I like about Mark Ruffalo's style of acting, and it's the same with sort of like an Oscar Isaac, is that there's a softness that I think was lacking way back when. And that is part of the reason why a lot of men turned down the role of Paul.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue because I know we both... Did you have that in your stuff
I didn't
too?
Because I knew there was a huge list and I knew you would cover it.
Okay. This is like everyone that turned down the role of Paul, according to William Goldman in his book. Warren Beatty, Robert De Niro.
No, Warren Beatty apparently didn't turn it down. He just kept kicking the can down the road.
And then they were like, okay, we need to do this movie, so we're going to give it to James Caan. Anyway, Warren Beatty, Robert De Niro, Michael Douglas, Richard Dreyfuss, Harrison Ford, Morgan Freeman, Mel Gibson, Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman, William Hurt twice, Kevin Kline, Al Pacino, Robert Redford, Denzel Washington, Jeff Daniels, Ed Harris, Ed O'Neill, Tim Allen, Robin Williams, and Bruce Willis.
So basically it's Bruce Willis I bet was mad that
and then he ended up playing
later
it
on. Yeah. I feel like that's every like known actor at the time.
Goldman said that the studio approached pretty much every man in Hollywood, and everyone said no. And this was in Goldman's words, because leading men hate to be passive. They hate to be eunuchized by their female co-stars. And then he said the only person who didn't say no was Warren Beatty, who eventually were like, we got to give this to somebody. We got to start filming this movie. This,
I think, is very different from nowadays.
Yeah. I think we've progressed past this.
Absolutely.
Maybe in part because of this.
Yeah. I feel like when people say things like, oh, there's been no progress in A, B, or C, whatever, something like this shows that in film there has been, because I absolutely could see almost any actor accepting this role.
Yeah.
I don't see a negative in Paul being what they consider passive. I didn't consider him to be passive. He's just a laid back guy.
He just wasn't flying off the handle, which is interesting that James Caan of all people ended up playing him because he's famous for flying off the handle as the hothead in The Godfather.
That is very true. And it shows that James Caan really was, I think, a better actor, like an underrated actor.
Yeah. I mean, he's only got really 3 like major like hits that have endured to today.
Hey, don't discount Dad Movie Brian's song.
That's true. But
I mean, nominated for it, I think.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's 3 movies that people talk about that he's in, like in 2022. Right. He was in a million movies that I'm sure many people love, and there's a lot of big ones. But like, it's this one, it's The Godfather, and it's Elf.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that have sort of lasted to 2022.
Sure.
And even if you look at those, they're all pretty different.
They are. But I think that the role of Paul is actually a lot deeper than maybe those actors and other, whatever people at that time thought.
Yeah.
Especially because he was trying to survive this.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, he's not going to yell and scream.
This is a survival
and be
movie.
This like alpha dude. Like, duh.
This is the most dangerous game.
Ugh, yeah.
This is not, this is not Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Exactly. So thank you, James Caan, for taking this movie.
Yes, we are con heads.
We are absolutely. So, all right. If we're talking about Annie now.
Yeah.
Annie is.
I'm all about it.
Annie's it's not really an Annie question, but
I've got some Annie talk.
All right, you talk.
No. Start it up.
All right. So Annie is obsessed with this writer,
yes,
Paul Sheldon. I cannot in 2022 really think of anyone that would be like an obsessive James Patterson fan or like whatever.
Yeah.
So my question is, what would be the 2022 version of this? Who would be the Paul Sheldon in this case? And I have a second part after that.
BTS.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's got to be a K-pop band.
Yes.
It's got to be BTS.
Yeah. You can't tell me that like
it's
RM
J-Hope
wouldn't get kidnapped and like
yeah, it's got to be.
You got to write this new song.
Yeah, it has to be a BTS or like
but it would be like an American person that kidnaps BTS. Like it would be like a weird American stan, not a Korean stan.
Yeah. I could see that someone in music I think would be probably the biggest one, more than an author.
Definitely not an author.
Definitely not an author. Of course, Stephen King put himself in the role there.
Well, there's a whole lot to unpack there too.
And then the other thing is, at any point would you have been an Annie instead of a Stan, right? I guess for someone who would be your Paul Sheldon at any point in your life.
I really don't know if I've ever had one.
Mine was Barney.
Barney.
I apparently was like obsessed with Barney back when I was like a little kid.
Maybe I did.
Like I was like hobbled Barney.
We need a new "I Love You, You Love Me" song.
What's her name?
Baby Bop.
Baby Bop. Oh my god. That is too much. Yeah, I was a huge Barney stan.
I can't even follow that up. I've got nothing.
All right. So give me some Annie questions.
Well, you said she was hot at one point in the movie.
Yeah, listen. I think that when
you didn't say it in those words, but
I didn't say Annie Wilkes is hot.
Wow, Annie Wilkes is hot.
I just said I was like, well, Kathy Bates looks really pretty. Yeah. Like, I think that a lot of times because she, in her own words in the movie, is not a Hollywood star, movie star looks or whatever.
Right.
I think a lot of people over the years have been kind of rude about Kathy Bates. And you know what? Obviously, the outfits weren't doing her any favors, but she was so pretty.
Kathy Bates rules.
Yeah, I love Kathy Bates.
That's
like, can we just like talk for a second about how she gets kind of like crapped on? And it's not fair.
Well, it's also sort of the point of the movie.
Of
the
course.
way that she was framed. So I have a lot about this. I thought this movie was really interesting because, sorry, this is going to be like boring movie talk. This isn't going to be Barney talk, but
well, what is?
This was a really interesting movie to me because like the directing, cinematography, acting, and all that, and the music, they had to convey entire plot points without any words.
Yeah, it was very show not tell.
Just by nature of Paul's isolation. So whenever Paul is sort of surveying the room and looking around at either the door or the hair clip on the ground for a lockpick, he's doing so almost entirely non-verbally. And so the viewer takes the cues from the other areas of the film, like his furrowed brows and pained expressions, close-ups of his hand barely reaching the hair clip, etc. And it's replacing what was a third-person omniscient narrator in the book. So you got a lot of his sort of internal monologue.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But with Annie, what they did was it was a lot of close-ups on her face, as if she was talking directly to the viewer.
Yeah,
which is what makes her so like intimidating and hulking and chilling, because a lot of it was filmed from below.
I was just about to say
that. As
if
you're laying like almost in the bed and looking at her like right up in your face.
Yeah.
It was just such a great job of framing her and making her a force of nature. Totally. Which I thought was really awesome, and it was really effectively done.
That shows you like how like people don't. I always say people don't think. Of course, people think this, but a lot of times we just think of, oh, the actors and actresses make a movie or make it bad, and it's something like that with cinematography. You don't really necessarily have that come to the forefront of your mind when you're watching. Yeah, but that makes it just all that more effective.
When you do recognize it, you're like, oh my god, that's awesome.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, and the music too. The Moonlight Sonata playing
that was awesome
during the hobbling scene is just, it's chilling. It's perfect.
I like can't even deal that scene. Ooh.
And when she's just right before she does it, when she's just unraveling his whole plan, when she was like, "Oh, I know how you unlocked the door. I know what you did with the penguin. Here's the knife you were keeping."
And then doesn't she go like, "God, I love you."
Yes. Yeah, she is awesome, and I just love that there is a full-on bloody knockdown, drag-out brawl between James Caan and Kathy Bates that is on film somewhere.
It's a great climax to a very simple film that knows what it is.
That's exactly why I love this movie so much, because it knows exactly what it is.
Gives us what we want.
Yes. So my other thing about Annie is that she had a lot of great food moments. Yes. In this too.
We're jumping right into the food segment?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Scrambled eggs a la Wilkes.
Yes. What was the...
I think it just had peppers in it.
Yeah, right? We see her watching The Love Connection, and she's just housing a bag of Cheetos.
Yeah, that's me.
She also on her nightstand, there was a 2-liter bottle of Coke.
Oh, I know. That's not so much me, but yes.
So one thing I found interesting about the food, how they sort of, again, progressed the plot with food. Mm-hmm. His meals got scarcer and scarcer throughout the movie.
Yes, I noticed that. And not as like appetizing.
Yeah, not as extravagant at all. But then they have Misery's return dinner when he tries to, poison her.
Oh, that's the meatloaf?
The meatloaf with Liberace blasting.
The meatloaf that has, all right, let me see if I remember, real tomatoes instead of from the can. Yes. And then what was the other part?
I got the other part.
All right, what's the other part?
Spam with the ground beef.
That's it. Okay, can I just tell you, I just saw the episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives where they were at Bagel Street Cafe in Plainsboro, where we used to live. Yeah. And one of the things that they do is a pork roll burger, and they put pieces of pork roll in the burger meat.
Oh, wow.
And so that reminded me of that.
That's pretty much what that is. So, and then there's obviously the Dom Perignon at the end of the movie.
I mean, that's great.
But yeah, food isn't abundant, but it's always serves a purpose in this movie. Yeah. Which I think is exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great if you're doing an Oscar watch party and you want to make food based on all the nominees.
Yes. The 1992 Oscars were probably, or was it 1991? Oscars were probably lit with the with the meatloaf.
Scrambled eggs a la Wilkes and the meatloaf.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, wait. Before we move on, that reminds me, though, there's an entire, to get into Real Housewives talk.
Okay, good.
This is segue. Exactly what you want.
I'm an expert, so.
All right. There's an entire Instagram account on like Real Housewives orders, and there's an actual point where they always will wait until the housewives order to cut to a different like thing. So we always know what they're ordering. Okay. Because I just feel like as viewers, food and drink is so interesting to us.
They have to make them relatable in some way.
I guess.
not so
not relatable. Like
not so rich people.
Denise Richards once ordered, I think it was a salad that it was just like 2 things and she got rid of one of the things. It was like, but I don't want Parmesan and I don't want it was like and she ordered a side of mashed potatoes. Like sometimes you get these orders and you're like, what? And so I think that as viewers, we always want to know what people are eating and drinking. So I like that Annie goes into detail on why her meatloaf is different and like because that is important to her.
Yeah.
And then it's important to us.
Yeah.
And we also, I think, in this movie have in the back of our minds, like, is she poisoning him?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Paul probably has in the back of his mind, but he can't eat.
Yeah.
He has to heal from his injuries from his car accident.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Annie says, if I die, you die. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. So do you have any other like questions or discussion?
Because I think I might have one.
I can go into trivia whenever you're ready.
Let's see. The only other one that I have 2. One is not really a question. It's just a comment. Is there a couple that's more goals than Buster and Virginia?
Oh yeah. We didn't even get to them.
Yeah.
No, they are ridiculous.
They're so funny.
They're just
so
like
old.
Yeah, they're just like older. They're like got to be in their like late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. But late 60s, early 70s, in the 80s and 90s.
It's like you're 90 years old.
Yeah, exactly. They are. How would you describe them?
Virginia just wants to get it on.
Virginia sounds promiscuous,
but just for Buster.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
And they joke with each other.
Yeah.
And it's cute. Like Virginia always is like, I bet Buster's out having an affair. And then he comes in and she's like, what's her name? Like, it's cute.
Yeah.
Like
that was when he bought like all the Misery novels and he was like, I was out getting evidence. Like,
yes. So I do feel like that's something that in the movie, of course we can't go into it, because we're covering enough in this movie, but I do feel so bad for Virginia. Because her husband died and was murdered. Like, that's awful. And you don't see her after that. No. There's nothing else about Buster.
You don't leave the house after that.
Justice for Buster.
Until the epilogue.
Yeah. So I do feel bad about that. But they're couple goals. And then my last question here is, do you have a favorite Stephen King adaptation? Do you have any other ones that you really like that we didn't talk about? I really liked the latest It. Not the second.
Not chapter 2.
I didn't see chapter 2, but the first one I thought was actually really well done.
Yeah. Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah. I really like Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. Green Mile's great.
I never saw the Green Mile, but
Yeah.
I don't actually like Stephen King's writing, to be honest with you. I tried to read Mr. Mercedes. I listened to it. Yeah. And I had to turn it off. I was like not into it at all. Although, am I crazy or is Brendan Gleeson involved in the adaptation of it? It was like made into a
TV show. I think he may have been. I think he may have been the detective.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm gonna have to watch that because it's Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah, we got to go through the Gleeson discography, filmography.
But I find that Stephen King as a writer is a little too hokey and cheesy.
He writes for himself.
Yeah.
He writes for people who loved like pulpy novels in the 70s.
Right. And that just isn't really my jam. I wasn't alive during that time, so I didn't read any of that stuff.
I don't love his reading, but his writing, but I find it very easy to fly through.
Okay. And I find that he goes on ad nauseum about descriptions of little things.
But again, he's appealing to people like my mom loved Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like he's appealing to those types of people who remember Lucky Strike cigarettes and stuff like, you know what I mean?
Like remember exactly what they looked like and be like, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I totally understand that. It's just not for me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah. I like his books because I think he's a master of plot.
That's fair.
But his
although
style,
I heard his endings are
not always the best.
Oh, that reminds me. Carrie's really good, and that has a good ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Which I've never seen, but I know the ending.
Yeah, of course. So, so Stephen King.
There's other ones like Pet Sematary, which I never saw. There's a lot there's a million that I haven't seen.
Oh, the 1123, 1408,
also
that one. Yeah. And then the what's this series that you think that
Dark Tower.
Idris Elba was in, or Matthew McConaughey
Both.
or something.
That was. Let's just move on.
Okay. And I feel that a lot of the things that I don't like about his writing on paper is what makes the adaptations really good.
Yeah.
That when you can turn it into showing, not telling, by visually being on the screen.
Yeah.
it really worked.
When you see the pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes instead
110%.
of him describing the logo and the
For
colors.
3 pages. Yes, exactly. All right. So what else do you got? I'm done.
Mrs. Nesbitt Award. Which one of them is it?
I don't know. I think everybody knows who they are. I don't think there is one.
Well, I think that, I don't know. I think that Paul has a little bit of like, I mean, I read a little bit more about the book.
Okay.
In the book, he has a lot of writer's block and he has a lot of like, I don't know what I'm going to do after this, but that's not really portrayed too much in the movie.
Okay.
But Annie at the same time is like, she's talking to God to find out where she needs to go next. And like, there's a heavy like religious component here in this movie too.
There is.
In the background. I mean, she wears her cross necklace the whole movie, but like, I don't know. It's probably Annie. If I had to, I mean, Paul has some, but I think it's Annie because she's again, she knows how much she loves Paul. She knows the novels like the back of her hand. She knows that she's probably going to murder him, given the scrapbook.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I don't know if she knows what to do after. Like, what's her next thing? And it turns out it was going to be suicide. So
yeah. Well, that is interesting because I feel like her, she maybe feels like she's at kind of the end of her journey. Just when you look at the book that she has created, that scrapbook, where it's like, okay, who does she want to be next? And I guess she kind of came to the end of that. She doesn't want to do anything else.
Killed everybody else.
She killed everybody else. Like, she wanted the house and the farm, so she killed her dad. She wanted to be a nurse, so she killed the head nurse or whatever. I don't know about all the babies.
Yeah,
that's a whole other thing. But now it's like,
that's just, that's creepy. That's weird. And
she does even say at the end when she's talking to Buster, and she's just trying to cover her tracks for why she bought all that paper and, you know, whatever. But she's saying to Buster, like, God told me that now I have to finish what Paul had started by being a writer and finishing Misery's story and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of interesting of her, at least, she probably doesn't mean it, but taking over once again for the person that she's responsible for kind of making disappear.
One thing I'm wondering is, why was she not the first suspect? Like, Buster knew who she was. Buster mentioned in the beginning, the Wilkes Farm, and Annie's up there, and like, there's all these news stories about her. In this small town, you would think that they would be like, okay, well, here's a person who was on trial for murdering a bunch of kids. At this trial, if you literally just read that article, she was talking about Misery and this guy's novels, and now this guy disappears.
That's a really good question. The only thing I can think of is when you actually know somebody, sometimes that goes the other way.
I guess.
It's like, oh, well, I know that they were accused of that, but they didn't really do it and they got off, and so like whatever. And I feel like, Annie's so nice and she comes into town all the time, and I know that she was accused of that thing so many years ago, but she's been great ever since.
Yeah.
So like, I think that when we actually know people, we're more willing to put up the blockers and to have the excuse of, well, I know that people think A, but since I actually know her, I think B.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
We don't explicitly get that in the movie, but
no,
maybe.
I'm just trying to think of a reason why she wouldn't be the automatic first.
The only
where
suspect.
Like literally on the helicopter ride, they're like, yeah, there's the Wilkes Farm, and that's the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
So I wonder who did it.
Yeah. So another thing I want to talk about is how this book is about. The book is really about Stephen King's battles with alcoholism, writer's block, and cocaine.
Yes.
So I read his book not too long ago. It's called On Writing, and it's just about his career and everything. And
we have like 75 copies of this book. I feel like everyone buys you this book.
We do, and I read it finally not too long ago, and it's really, really good. But he talks a lot about his inspirations for certain of his novel. He has too many to really go through, but for Misery in particular, he was saying how. And now, of course, I can't find it. But he basically said that Annie Wilkes, to him, is cocaine. Like, he was a prisoner of his addictions at the time. And he was writing a story about a famous writer, breaking free of those addictions. Which I think is a really cool, like, way of doing that.
Yeah.
And, like, way of confronting yourself.
Symbolism.
Yeah. And so, one thing that I also found in this book was that he wrote... He writes about his initial ending. So in the book, it ends more or less the same way except in the epilogue, he's not at a restaurant. He's like at home, and he has writer's block, and he comes up with an idea for a book, and then he just starts crying because it's like him putting to bed everything that had previously happened.
That's actually a really nice ending.
Yeah. So the
and then also in the book, he gets his foot is amputated.
Yes.
Not
so he has a prosthetic at the end.
Okay.
So he talks a lot in his book about here. I'll just read his description of his original ending for the book because it's crazy. Paul Sheldon wakes up to find himself Annie Wilkes' prisoner. I thought I knew what was going to happen. Annie would demand that Paul write another novel about his plucky continuing character, Misery Chastain, one just for her. After first demurring, Paul would of course agree. A psychotic nurse, I thought, could be very persuasive. Annie would tell him she intended to sacrifice her beloved pig, Misery, to this project. Misery's return would, she'd say, consist of but one copy, a holographic manuscript bound in pigskin.
Oh, yeah. Did you talk about the fact that she had a pig that she named Misery?
I did in the plot summary, yeah. He said, here we'd fade out, I thought, and return to Annie's remote Colorado retreat 6 or 8 months later for the surprise ending. Paul is gone, his sick room turned into a shrine to Misery Chastain, but Misery the pig is still very much in evidence, grunting serenely away in her sty beside the barn.
No.
On the walls of the Misery room are book covers, stills from the Misery movies, pictures of Paul Sheldon, perhaps a newspaper headline reading famed romance novelist still missing. In the center of the room, carefully spotlighted, is a single book on a small table. A cherrywood table, of course, in honor of Mr. Kipling. Apparently he's a big Rudyard Kipling fan.
Okay.
It is the Annie Wilkes edition of Misery's Return. The binding is beautiful, and it should be. It is the skin of Paul Sheldon.
That is so creepy.
And Paul himself, his bones might be buried behind the barn, but I thought it likely that the pig would have eaten the tasty parts. So he then goes on to say basically that he says, not bad, and it would have made a pretty good story.
Yeah.
Not such a good novel, however. No one likes to root for a guy over the course of 300 pages, only to discover that between chapters 16 and 17, the pig ate him. But that wasn't the way things eventually went. Paul Sheldon turned out to be a good deal more resourceful than I initially thought. And his efforts to save his life gave me a chance to say some things about the redemptive power of writing that I had long felt but never articulated. And then he goes into detail about Annie, saying how she was way more complex than he had imagined her. And she was great fun to write about. Here was a woman pretty much stuck with cock-a-doodle brat when it came to profanity,
yes,
but who felt absolutely no qualms about chopping off her favorite writer's foot when he tried to get away from her. In the end, I felt that Annie was almost as much to be pitied as to be feared. And none of the story's details and incidents proceeded from plot. They were organic, each arising naturally from the initial situation, each an uncovered part of the fossil. And I'm writing all this with a smile. As sick with drugs and alcohol as I was much of the time, I had such fun with that one.
That's really cool.
And so did we.
We did.
We had so much fun with that.
We had so much fun with that. I am happy that it was a happy ending. I think that the end, if it was that original ending, would have been great for shock factor. But I kind of like that I'm left a little buoyant when I finish that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the point of the movie was to be negative. I think it was supposed to be a thriller where the good guy wins in the end.
Yeah, and I like that.
Again, it knew what it was.
And that's something that I think is rare nowadays.
Yeah, I feel like people feel like they have to trick everybody.
Yeah, exactly. One last shock, and it's like that's not always necessary. It's cool. Like if that was the ending, that's cool too. But I like the ending that we got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I'll go to some trivia.
Great.
More Stephen King stuff. He loved Kathy Bates in this movie so much that he wrote 2 more roles for her.
Really?
So in the movie Dolores Claiborne, she ended up playing the character based on Dolores Claiborne from the novel.
Okay.
And he also, in the miniseries of The Stand, changed a character from a man to a woman so that Kathy Bates could play that character.
Cool.
He also said, in addition to what he said in the book, that Annie's his favorite character he's ever written.
Really?
Yeah.
She's so great. I love that there's a sense of humor there.
Yeah.
I love it.
Heading back to that big list of actors, Jack Nicholson. This is just a fun fact. Jack Nicholson, when he turned down the role, did I even say him?
I think you did. I don't know.
Anyway, he turned down the role, which was interesting because James Caan had previously turned down the role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, James Caan, really?
Well, and the main character in both movies is the victim of a psychotic nurse.
Wow,
it's just a little fun little thing there.
Yeah, Nurse Ratched.
Sliding doors moment right there.
That's really cool.
Kathy Bates. Okay, I've got 3 more.
All right.
2 of them are Kathy Bates. First, She was reportedly disappointed that a scene was cut in which she kills a young police officer by rolling him over repeatedly with a lawnmower.
Oh my God. Very Fargo.
But it probably wasn't cut for the reason you think. Well, maybe it is the reason you think. Rob Reiner thought the audience would laugh at it.
There you go. Which at Fargo with the wood chipper, that's exactly.
Yeah. So maybe this probably was filmed, but it didn't make it into the final cut of the movie.
So smart of Rob Reiner, because that's literally the first thing that popped in my head.
Yes. And during her Oscar speech, she said, "I would like to thank Jimmy Caan and apologize publicly for the ankles."
That's awesome. She's the best.
And I love this one. After they wrapped filming, Richard Farnsworth, who played Buster, gave Rob Reiner the hat he wore during his introduction.
Fun. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a great character as well.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see I was talking to you about it yesterday. He was in a movie that David Lynch did, his final role, and I'm excited to see that one.
Straight Story?
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Where he like rides a John Deere across the US or something.
Yeah. It's definitely low key.
Yeah, which I'm
which
down
is not
for.
not very David Lynch, but
no, apparently
that's why I'd be
a little off center for what he normally does.
That's why I'd be interested in watching it for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else that you have, Tom?
I'm just gonna flip right through. I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, like we said, this movie is what it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing like profound to talk. Like, the movie's great. Go watch the movie.
Yeah. 5
It's
stars.
on Showtime.
It's on Showtime?
Yeah.
Easy enough. Most of us have Showtime, I guess.
If you don't, let me know. I'll give you my password.
Stop. No, we won't. No, we won't Showtime. We promise.
The one thing that we sort of alluded to is like Annie's vernacular is incredible.
Oh, yeah. You cockadoodle.
Yeah, she calls him Mr. Man a lot.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I wanted to talk to you about that. Yeah, whenever she's mad at him, she calls him Mr. Man.
Yeah.
Which shows you kind of maybe her relationship with her husband, where she maybe felt like less than.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's like, oh, you're the big, strong man. Okay,
right.
Mr. Man.
Right.
And so she calls him Mr. Man, even when he's like not, because he doesn't fly off the handle at her at all.
Not a single time. Until he hits her over the head with a typewriter.
I mean, yeah, there's that. But it's so interesting that she calls him Mr. Man, and it's kind of her working herself up.
And that's one of those Stephen King-isms too.
Yeah.
Like, you could see him writing Mr. Man a million times in the book. Right. And things like Heavens to Betsy and stuff like that, where she and cockadoodie, whatever she was saying. Yeah. And then there's the one point where she just curses the one guy out, which is great. Was it the guy that she like almost crashed into?
No, she doesn't curse him out. She does the same thing where she's like, you cockadoodle, but then she uses the first part of that for a very not so nice thing that she yells at James Caan.
At Paul, okay.
At Paul,
yeah.
And that's like the final turn.
Yes.
Where she actually curses at him.
Yes, right. At the end.
Yeah. And I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I also love that the house that like they're in, it's almost like this weird labyrinth, but it's not. Like, it's just a house.
Yeah,
but you still feel like, oh my God, what's that door going to go to? What's that? But it's just a house. I love that.
The way that he wheels around, it's very disorienting.
Yeah, and I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
Because of course, anytime you go to somebody's house,
yeah, you're
like, where's the bathroom? What door is it? Whatever.
That's another thing that's a testament to like the cinematography and everything like that.
Yep.
Because, you know, he's turning and he's opening a door and you're like, wait, wasn't that the kitchen before? And now it's like the room with the penguin and like the phone where the lines have been taken out, like all that.
All I can say is this house was made very pre-open concept.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that it would pass inspection in many areas.
No, the Property Brothers...
Even back then.
The Property Brothers would definitely take down some of those walls, although some may be load-bearing. They need to put in a beam or two.
This is a different show, but I would definitely list it.
If you're loving it or listing it. Yeah. I would probably list it as well.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I think we're ending with love it or list it for Misery.
Perfect.
So, yeah, hope you enjoyed the episode.
What's next week, Tom?
Our next week is another one that was before we were born.
Yes.
And it's one that has come back into pop culture recently. It is 1986's Top Gun.
Yeah. I have a whole thing about I was such a weird child, Tom. I'll talk all about how this was my favorite movie for quite some time growing up.
Okay.
I don't know why.
I don't know if I really know the details of it. So
there aren't really details. I was just obsessed with this movie.
Well, we'll talk about that next week too.
Awesome.
So
and I already have the next week too. I'm like already. I'm so excited for the next.
We're ready to go. So Top Gun was directed by Tony Scott. It stars Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis, Val Kilmer. It was the highest grossing film in the United States in 1986, and it had one of the most popular movie soundtracks ever.
Oh yeah, you got your Berlin, you got your Kenny Loggins.
How many times platinum?
Let's say 3.
9.
What?
9 times platinum.
Oh my God.
And the most important fact about this movie is, as I said, I've never seen it.
Yeah, Tom's never seen it. I can't believe you've never seen Top Gun.
Yeah.
You don't feel the need for speed?
No, I love Danger Zone.
Danger Zone's such a good song. It's such an 80s classic intro song.
Yeah, and I mean, the movie obviously has an enduring hold on pop culture because it spawned a sequel, obviously, which you all know if you're listening to this, Top Gun Maverick.
Yep.
It is thus far the highest grossing movie of 2022, which the fact that that's not a Marvel movie is a major achievement.
It really is. I know that it's like, oh, it's a sequel, but come on, it's a sequel from 1986.
How many sequels?
I don't really count that.
How many sequels come out every year? And how many of them beat, Doctor Strange or, whatever, Thor that just came out?
And listen, here's the thing. I know that we're very conflicted on Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
The man is a movie star.
He's a star.
He's a movie star.
Yeah,
listen, it is what it is.
Listen, if there's any Scientologists out there,
Yikes.
just close your ears for this one. But, he's not a great guy.
Yeah.
Not a very good guy.
No.
We know that.
We'll talk. We could have a whole Scientology segment because
okay.
I have seen all that stuff. I love all those.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do Scientology next week. We'll do an audit.
Perfect. Get those Thetans out.
Yeah. So the original Top Gun is available on Prime Video and on Paramount Plus. So obviously, like every week, we'd love for you to watch it before next week. Follow along with us, but obviously, as always, the plot summary, I'll have that in the description, when that ends. So if you don't want to get too spoiled. Anyway, Top Gun's next week. Continue to follow us on Instagram, @Baby's First Watchlist, on Twitter, @Baby's Watchlist. Rate us 5 stars everywhere if you want. 2 stars.
No 2 stars, only 5 stars.
Oh, yeah, you have to be nice to us.
Yeah, I told that.
Right.
We've said that from the beginning. You have to be nice to us.
Right. But yeah, I think right now, the best thing you could do for us is rate us 5 stars because that'll get us on like some of the search lists and like suggested to other people and all that.
Well, or you know what? You can also just like tell a friend who likes movies about it.
Yeah, you could do that, but also rating it's so much easier.
Yeah. But also shout out to all of our friends and family who listen. We get so many little texts and comments and people just like reaching out every week, and it makes our hearts so happy that you're listening and you're hearing for April's little jingles and maybe now for our little babies whimpers and coos.
He had a few today.
He had a couple. I don't know if you can spot them. And so we just want to thank you for that. And if you listen to us and you don't know us, I don't know. Tell us. Tell us on the Instagram. Like, comment on our thing and tell us, because I don't know if anybody does.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so. But it's still cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'll see you later.
Bye, Babysitters Club.